The cease and desist notice was taped to the front door of my feed mill before sunrise. Bright red border, 3 pages, Lake Ridge Estates HOA letterhead, and one sentence printed in bold near the top. Unauthorized commercial operation must cease immediately. I stood there with a cup of coffee in one hand and the notice in the other, while a grain delivery truck idled beside the loading bay. The driver leaned out his window and asked whether he should leave. I told him to wait. Then I read the rest. The HOA accused me of operating a prohibited business adjacent to a residential community. Truck traffic, noise, signage, commercial storage, and customer pickups. They demanded that I suspend operations within 72 hours. If I refused, the board threatened legal action, complaints to county zoning, daily penalties, and what they called enforcement against access privileges. That last phrase caught my attention. Access privileges. I had owned the old feed mill for 4 months. Lake Ridge did not own the mill. They did not own my parking lot. They did not own the county road in front of it. And they definitely did not control whether my customers were allowed to enter private property. I looked across the road. There was HOA President Vanessa Pierce standing beside the stone Lake Ridge entrance monument. She had 2 board members with her. Vanessa had been complaining about the mill since the week I reopened. She hated the delivery trucks. She hated the old grain silos. And she hated the fact that residents could see pickup trailers parked outside. Most of all, she hated that I refused to ask the HOA for permission to operate. I walked over and asked whether she had authorized the notice. She said the board had. I asked what law I was supposedly violating. She said Lake Ridge was a residential community, and my business was incompatible with the neighborhood. I reminded her that the mill was not inside Lake Ridge. She said that did not matter, because my operation affected association property and residents. Then she gave me the sentence that told me exactly how she viewed the situation. You bought an abandoned building beside our community. That doesn't mean you get to turn it into whatever you want. I looked past her at the feed mill. The building had been there since 1968. The subdivision had been there since 2007. For almost 40 years before Lake Ridge existed, that parcel had been used for agricultural storage, livestock feed, seed sales, and equipment loading. I had not invented a new use. I had restored an old one. I asked Vanessa whether she had checked the zoning map. She said the HOA attorney had reviewed the issue. I asked for the parcel classification. She did not answer. Instead, she pointed toward a box truck waiting to turn into my lot and said this was exactly the problem. Too much commercial activity, too much traffic, too much disruption. I asked whether Lake Ridge had a recorded covenant over my parcel. No answer. Whether there was an annexation agreement. No answer. Whether there was any county order requiring me to close. Still nothing. Then she told me that if I ignored the notice, the board would make sure county enforcement shut the business down. I folded the letter and put it in my jacket. Then I told the grain driver to back into Bay 2. The truck rolled past us. Vanessa stared at me like I had just challenged her personally. I had not. I had challenged her assumption. That afternoon, I called a land use attorney, then the county zoning office, then a title company. Then I pulled the original deed and the oldest site plan I could find. By the end of the week, I had the answer. The old feed mill sat on a commercial agricultural parcel with a lawful pre-existing use that had never been absorbed into Lake Ridge. The HOA had no authority to fine it, no authority to close it, and no authority to regulate my sign, customers, or deliveries. And buried in the same county records was another problem Vanessa had no idea existed. The decorative Lake Ridge entrance wall she was standing beside had been built partly inside a recorded access easement serving my property. The HOA wanted my trucks gone. Instead, the county was about to ask them why their monument was narrowing a legal commercial access corridor that had existed before their subdivision. My name is Cole Turner. I am 48 years old, and I grew up around farms. My father repaired tractors. My uncle sold seed, and I spent enough summers unloading 50-pound feed bags to know exactly how heavy 50 pounds becomes after the first 100 bags. I did not grow up dreaming about owning a feed mill, but I always liked old working properties. They had purpose. Not polished purpose, practical purpose. The Mercer Feed and Supply building had been abandoned for almost 9 years when I first saw it. The front windows were dusty. One loading door hung crooked. The paint had faded to a dull gray, and weeds grew through cracks in the asphalt. 2 old silos stood behind the main building like rusted towers. Most people driving past saw a dead commercial property waiting to be demolished. I saw a building that still had good bones. The property sat on 5.5 acres outside Knoxville, Tennessee. It was not large, but the location was unusual. A county road ran along the front, farms and rural parcels stretched west, and Lake Ridge estates wrapped around the east and south. The subdivision had been built much later, after development spread outward from town. I learned the mill's history before I made an offer. The original owner, Harold Mercer, opened it in 1968. For decades, farmers brought pickup trucks, livestock trailers, and flatbeds there. The mill sold feed, seed, fencing supplies, mineral blocks, fertilizer, small equipment parts, animal bedding, and seasonal farm products. The property also handled bulk deliveries. That history mattered, because zoning is not just about what a building looks like today. It is about lawful use, recorded use, permitted use, and sometimes grandfathered use. Before closing, I hired an attorney to review the parcel. The county zoning map showed it as CA, Commercial Agricultural Transitional Use. The old certificates supported feed and farm supply operations. The parcel had never been rezoned residential, never annexed into Lake Ridge, and never made subject to Lake Ridge covenants. That gave me confidence. I bought it. Then I spent months restoring it. I replaced the roof over the warehouse wing, rewired the office, repaired the loading dock, repainted the front, rebuilt one section of cracked pavement, installed modern fire extinguishers and emergency lighting, passed building inspection, passed fire inspection, registered the business, applied for the signs, and updated stormwater controls around the rear storage area. I did not simply show up and start running trucks through an unsafe building. I did it properly. The business reopened as Turner Farm Supply. Not a massive industrial operation. No night shifts, no manufacturing line, no livestock auction, and no 24-hour trucking. We sold feed, fencing supplies, seed, farm hardware, and seasonal products. Most customers arrived in pickups, some brought trailers, and we received 2 or 3 larger deliveries per week. The old building started looking alive again. That was when Lake Ridge noticed me. At first, some residents liked it. One man bought grass seed. A woman from inside the subdivision bought bird feed every month. A few homeowners came for garden supplies. Then Vanessa Pierce appeared. Vanessa was president of Lake Ridge HOA. She introduced herself by asking how long I intended to run a commercial operation. I told her I had just opened, so hopefully a long time. She did not laugh. She said residents had purchased homes, expecting a quiet residential environment. I told her I understood, which was why I restricted large deliveries to daytime hours and kept outdoor lighting down. She said the issue was larger than noise, and she did not want box trucks, farm trailers, pallets, or commercial signage visible from the subdivision entrance. I asked what she wanted me to do. Her answer was revealing. She wanted me to convert the property into something more compatible, like professional offices, boutique retail, or maybe a cafe, something that fit Lake Ridge. I told her I had not bought a feed mill to turn it into a coffee shop. That was our first real disagreement. If you are listening to this and you own older commercial, agricultural, or mixed-use property beside a newer HOA, this is one of those situations where the county record matters more than neighborhood expectations. A subdivision can grow around an older property without automatically gaining control over it. If you have ever watched a newer development act like everything around it should adapt to its rules, leave your thoughts in the comments. Share this story with someone who owns land near an HOA, because old zoning classifications, access easements, and recorded uses can become very important when the neighborhood around you changes. I had no interest in antagonizing Lake Ridge. I wanted customers, I wanted a clean property, and I wanted to run a useful business. But I was not going to erase 50 years of lawful land use because an HOA president disliked seeing a feed truck from the entrance monument. The cease and desist was only the beginning. 2 days later, one of my suppliers called. A Lake Ridge security guard had stopped his truck near the subdivision entrance and told him commercial vehicles were prohibited. The truck was not entering Lake Ridge. It was turning into my driveway. The driver had slowed because the HOA monument narrowed the approach. The guard told him the area was private association access. That was false. The county road was public, my driveway was private, and Lake Ridge controlled neither. I asked the driver to write down exactly what happened. Then I checked the security camera. The footage showed the guard stepping into the edge of my driveway and waving the truck back. That crossed a line. I emailed the property manager. His response said Lake Ridge was enforcing traffic safety near the entrance. I asked for the traffic control authority. No answer. The next incident happened on Saturday. A customer arrived with a livestock trailer. Vanessa was walking near the HOA entrance. She photographed the trailer and later emailed me that oversized commercial and agricultural vehicles were creating a hazard. I reminded her that farm trailers were legal on the county road, and lawful customers were entering private commercial property. She responded that the board would elevate the matter. Then complaints started going to the county. Noise complaint, traffic complaint, signage complaint, outdoor storage complaint, commercial use complaint. I knew because county inspectors called me. I invited them in every time. The sign permit was valid. The use was lawful. The storage complied with setback requirements. The loading schedule complied with local noise rules. And the fire inspection was current. The first few complaints went nowhere. Vanessa changed strategy. The HOA attorney sent a letter claiming Turner Farm Supply constituted an incompatible expansion of a non-conforming use. That sounded more serious. If the feed mill had only limited grandfathered rights, expanding beyond those rights could create a real zoning issue. So I took it seriously. I hired Maya Foster, a land use attorney. Maya did not assume I was right just because the building was old. She asked for everything: business license, old permits, tax records, historical photographs, prior advertisements, fire inspections, property cards, delivery records from previous ownership, and archived phone directories. Anything showing what the mill had historically done. Then she asked one important question. Had I expanded the use? I told her what I sold: feed, seed, fencing, farm supplies, small hardware, animal bedding, and fertilizer. Exactly the categories I had found in the old sales records. No restaurant, no manufacturing plant, no truck terminal, no new warehouse building, and no extended night operations. That helped. Then we found old county property records describing the site as feed, agricultural retail, farm supply warehouse, and bulk delivery. The legal use history matched what I was doing. The HOA argument weakened, but Vanessa kept pushing. At a board meeting, she told residents my operation would lower property values, warned that truck traffic could increase, and said the HOA had a responsibility to protect the character of Lake Ridge. Residents began repeating those concerns online. Some were angry, some were simply confused, and a few assumed my business had opened without permits. That was what bothered me most. Vanessa was turning an administrative disagreement into a story where I looked like someone exploiting a loophole. I was not exploiting anything. I had checked the rules before I bought. Then the HOA escalated again. A temporary barricade appeared near the edge of the Lake Ridge entrance one morning. It did not block my driveway completely, but it narrowed the turning radius for longer vehicles. A delivery truck had to reverse and make a second approach. My camera recorded the entire thing. I walked over and photographed the barricade. Behind it stood the decorative stone monument. I had always assumed the monument was entirely inside Lake Ridge property. Maya told me not to assume. She ordered a title review, then a survey. That decision changed the entire case. The old mill parcel had a 30-foot access easement recorded in 1974. It did not just cover my driveway. It widened near the road to create a commercial turning apron for trucks entering the property. When Lake Ridge was developed decades later, the subdivision road had been designed around that existing access. But somewhere during later entrance beautification, the HOA installed a stone monument, landscaping, 2 decorative columns, and a short section of ornamental wall. Part of that construction sat inside the old commercial access easement, not on my fee simple land, but inside a corridor where the mill had recorded access rights. That meant the object making my trucks harder to turn was not just annoying, it might be an unlawful obstruction. The HOA had spent weeks complaining that my trucks did not belong. The title record showed the truck access had been there before Lake Ridge existed. The surveyor's name was Thomas Avery. He had been working in the county for almost 30 years. He did not care who was HOA president. He cared about recorded dimensions. Thomas found the original mill parcel corners, then the road right-of-way, then the easement description. The access corridor widened near the road exactly where the old record said it should. The decorative wall crossed into it. One column sat several feet inside the easement area, and a landscaped island reduced usable turning width even more. Thomas marked everything with orange flags, paint, measurements, and photographs. Then Maya pulled the subdivision approval package. The original Lake Ridge developer knew about the easement. The plans showed it clearly. In fact, an engineering note instructed designers to preserve commercial access to the existing feed mill parcel. That was the legal equivalent of a spotlight. The development had been approved around the mill, not the other way around. Then we reviewed zoning records. The county planner found the parcel history. Commercial agricultural use was documented decades before Lake Ridge. Later zoning changes around the area did not eliminate that status. There were also records showing continued operation under previous owners. Even during the years when the mill slowed down, the property was not formally converted to residential use. Maya explained the key distinction to me. An abandoned-looking building does not always equal abandoned legal use. Continuity rules can be complicated, but here, the county had not recorded a termination of the use. The parcel remained eligible for the same general commercial agricultural activity, subject to modern safety and permitting requirements. I had complied with those. Then we found something even better. When I applied for the business reopening, the county zoning office had issued a written determination confirming feed and farm supply retail as permitted on the parcel. I had kept the letter. I just had not realized how important it would become. Maya attached it to her response to the HOA. The letter was simple: parcel number, zoning district, existing lawful use, and approved categories. No HOA interpretation required. Lake Ridge's attorney replied 3 days later. The tone changed. They no longer demanded immediate closure. Instead, they asked whether I would agree to truck hour restrictions, sign limitations, outdoor storage controls, and a shared traffic plan. Some of those requests were reasonable topics for cooperation, but Maya warned me not to sign anything that gave the HOA authority it did not already have. We could voluntarily coordinate. We should not accidentally create jurisdiction. That distinction became our strategy. I agreed to keep large deliveries between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. I agreed not to use bright flashing signage, and I agreed to keep pallets behind the warehouse line. Those were business decisions, not HOA rules. In return, Maya demanded that security stop interfering with customers. The barricades be removed, the entrance obstruction be reviewed, the HOA acknowledge my parcel was outside the association, and all claims of zoning violations cease unless supported by county action. Vanessa refused. She believed that compromise would make the HOA look weak, so she filed another county complaint. This time she alleged illegal intensification of commercial traffic. County zoning scheduled a formal site review. That was exactly what Maya wanted. Not because we controlled the outcome, but because finally, an authority with actual jurisdiction would put everything on record. Before the inspection, I organized the property. Not to hide anything, but to make the facts easy to see. Permits in one binder, historical use documents in another, fire inspection, business license, zoning determination, old photographs showing trucks at the mill in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, archived advertisements, survey, and access easement. Then I printed one photograph that made me smile. It showed a feed truck turning into the mill in 1986. Behind it was open pasture. No subdivision, no stone monument, no decorative entrance, no HOA. The trucks were not invading Lake Ridge. Lake Ridge had been built around the truck access. That difference was about to matter. County Zoning Officer Rachel Dunn arrived on a Tuesday morning. With her came a traffic engineer and a planning technician. Lake Ridge sent Vanessa, the property manager, its attorney, and 2 board members. Maya attended with me. We started inside the feed mill. Rachel checked the use: feed storage, retail area, seed, fencing supplies, farm hardware, and loading zone. She asked about delivery frequency, and I showed logs. She asked about hours, and I showed posted business hours. She inspected outdoor storage, measured setbacks, looked at the sign, and checked the zoning file. Nothing about the operation surprised her. Then Vanessa argued that the current business was more intensive than the historical mill, because customers were coming from a wider area. Rachel asked what zoning provision tied legality to customer ZIP codes. There was none. Vanessa argued truck traffic had increased. The county reviewed average daily trips. The numbers were modest, and the property had historically supported larger bulk deliveries than I was receiving now. Then Rachel read the written zoning determination issued when I reopened. Her conclusion was direct. Turner Farm Supply was operating within a permitted commercial agricultural use. No zoning violation, no order to close, and no requirement to obtain HOA approval. That should have ended the meeting. Instead, the traffic engineer asked about the driveway. I showed the easement survey. He walked toward the road. Then he stopped beside the decorative Lake Ridge monument. Thomas had already marked the access corridor with flags. The engineer looked at the stone column, then the wall, then the landscaped island, then back at the survey. He asked when the entrance improvements were installed. The property manager said about 6 years earlier. Did Lake Ridge obtain permission from the mill owner to build within the access corridor? Nobody knew. Was there an easement amendment? No. Was there a recorded relocation agreement? No. The traffic engineer measured the remaining turning radius. A large delivery truck could enter, but the obstruction forced a tighter approach than the old easement design allowed. That was why some drivers swung close to the Lake Ridge entrance. The HOA had spent weeks accusing my suppliers of creating dangerous turns, while their own entrance project had narrowed the legal turning area. Vanessa tried to separate the issues. She said the monument had nothing to do with whether residents deserved protection from commercial traffic. The county engineer disagreed. Access design was directly relevant to traffic safety. He asked for Lake Ridge's entrance permits. The HOA produced a landscape permit. The decorative work had apparently been approved as beautification, but the old access easement had not been shown accurately on the application. That created a new review. The county did not instantly order demolition. Real cases do not usually work that way. They gave Lake Ridge time to submit documents and show whether the encroachment could remain without impairing the easement. Maya sent a formal demand separately. My position was not that I wanted to destroy their entrance. I wanted full usable access restored. If the monument could be modified, fine. If it had to move, that was Lake Ridge's problem. Then, the HOA attorney asked for a private meeting. That was the first time Vanessa looked genuinely worried. The case had reversed. A month earlier, Lake Ridge had threatened to shut down my business. Now the county had confirmed the business was lawful. The HOA had no covenant authority over my parcel. Security had interfered with customers without jurisdiction, and the HOA's own entrance structure was sitting in a recorded commercial access corridor. The strongest part was that none of this depended on revenge. I did not need to invent a new use. I did not need to bring in louder trucks. I did not need to threaten the board. The old documents already told the story. The feed mill belonged there. The access belonged there. Lake Ridge had simply forgotten that newer development does not erase older property rights. The county issued its written zoning determination 10 days later. No violation. That phrase appeared near the top. The letter confirmed lawful commercial agricultural use, permitted farm supply retail, lawful deliveries, compliant signage, and no county basis for closure. The HOA's cease and desist lost whatever intimidation value it had left. Maya demanded written withdrawal, and Lake Ridge agreed. Then came the entrance review. The county traffic engineer concluded that the decorative wall and landscaped island interfered with the historic commercial turning envelope. They did not completely block access, but they reduced the functional width enough to create avoidable conflict with larger vehicles. The recommended correction was not dramatic. Move one stone column, shorten part of the wall, remove the landscaped island, and restore turning clearance. Lake Ridge had two options: modify the entrance voluntarily, or fight an easement dispute while the county reviewed the safety issue. Their attorney recommended modification. Vanessa hated that. The entrance monument had been one of her favorite HOA projects. It appeared on the community website. It was the first thing prospective buyers saw, and now contractors were going to cut into it because the board had ignored an older access right. The work took 4 days. The stone column came down, a section of wall was removed, the island was excavated, and the curb line changed. Then the column was rebuilt farther inside Lake Ridge property. The final entrance still looked nice. It just stopped squeezing my trucks. The first delivery after the work was completed turned into my driveway cleanly. No reverse, no correction, and no security guard waving anyone away. The problem was solved. That should have been the end. But HOA residents had started asking why legal fees and entrance reconstruction were appearing in board financial reports. Lake Ridge scheduled a public meeting. The clubhouse was full. I attended because several residents had bought products from my store and wanted to hear what had actually happened. Vanessa opened by saying the board had acted to protect residential character and traffic safety. Then a homeowner asked whether my business was illegal. The HOA attorney said no. Another asked whether I was inside Lake Ridge. No. Another asked whether the county had ordered me to close. No. Then someone asked why the board sent a cease and desist. The attorney said the association had concerns based on compatibility and possible zoning issues. A man in the second row raised his hand. He had lived in Lake Ridge since the first phase. He asked whether the feed mill existed before the subdivision. Yes. Whether the access easement existed before the subdivision. Yes. Whether the original developer knew about it. Yes. Then he asked the question Vanessa could not answer cleanly. If everyone knew the mill was there first, why did the board spend association money trying to regulate it? The room changed. Residents were not angry because they loved feed trucks. They were angry because the fight suddenly looked unnecessary. A homeowner near the front said she had been told my business opened without approval. The HOA attorney clarified that no HOA approval was required. Another resident said he had been told my customers were illegally using Lake Ridge access. The county road and my driveway were not HOA property. Then the treasurer presented costs: legal review, outside counsel, traffic consultation, entrance reconstruction, security overtime, and administrative work. All because the board had escalated before confirming what authority it actually had. A motion was introduced to require legal review before future enforcement involving non-member parcels. It passed unanimously. Another motion removed Vanessa's unilateral authority to direct security outside association property. That passed too. She remained president for the moment, but not for long. 3 weeks later, a petition circulated calling for a leadership vote. Vanessa resigned before the meeting. No dramatic exit, no police, no public confrontation, just a short email saying she believed the community needed new leadership. The new board president contacted me within days. His name was David Coleman. He asked for a meeting. We sat in my office at the feed mill. No attorneys, no binders. He told me Lake Ridge did not want a permanent war with its oldest commercial neighbor. Neither did I. We agreed on practical things. Large deliveries would stay inside daytime hours when possible. My drivers would avoid staging along the subdivision entrance. Lake Ridge security would stay off my property and stop directing my customers. Any future entrance work would respect the easement, and any complaints would go through the county if they involved zoning. That conversation took less than 40 minutes. Months of conflict could have been avoided by doing exactly that in the beginning. A year later, Turner Farm Supply was doing better than I expected. We added a small garden section, expanded fencing inventory, and started carrying local honey and seed mixes. A few Lake Ridge residents became regular customers. One of them joked that Vanessa would probably hate seeing him buy bird feed from me. I told him bird feed was politically neutral. The old mill still looked like a feed mill. That mattered to me. The silos stayed, the loading dock stayed, and the warehouse stayed. I restored the old Mercer feed sign and mounted it inside the store as a piece of history. The property did not need to become something fashionable to justify its existence. It had already earned its place. Lake Ridge kept its nice entrance. The monument was rebuilt a few feet farther back. Most people driving through would never know it had moved, but truck drivers noticed immediately. The turn was safer, cleaner, and exactly what the easement had been designed to provide decades earlier. The county never shut me down. There were no daily fines, no forced closure, and no commercial use violation. The HOA withdrew its cease and desist and confirmed in writing that my parcel was not subject to Lake Ridge covenants. That document went into my property file. So did the access survey, and so did the county zoning determination. I wanted the next owner, whenever that day came, to have everything organized. No ambiguity, no forgotten rights. No old assumption waiting to become another fight. David, the new HOA president, eventually asked whether I would sponsor one of Lake Ridge's community events. I said yes, and I donated garden seed kits for their spring fair. That might sound strange after everything that happened, but it was not. My dispute had never been with 73 families. It had been with a board that confused neighborhood preference with legal authority. Once that stopped, there was no reason to keep fighting. That was the lesson I carried from the entire mess. Property disputes often become personal because people start believing compromise means surrender. It does not. The strongest position is knowing exactly where your rights begin and where they end. Lake Ridge had every right to regulate its own common property, every right to enforce its own covenants against actual members, and every right to complain to county zoning if they believed I was violating the law. What they did not have was the right to invent jurisdiction over my parcel because they disliked what they saw from their entrance. And I had responsibilities too. I had to comply with county zoning, fire code, traffic rules, business licensing, and environmental requirements. Operating outside an HOA did not mean operating outside the law. It meant the right law had to apply. If this story made you think about old commercial properties, grandfathered uses, zoning maps, access easements, or an HOA that assumes nearby land must follow its preferences, Share it with someone who owns property beside a newer development. Save the video if you are ever buying an older business parcel, because deeds, zoning determinations, historical permits, surveys, and access records can matter more than what a neighborhood map suggests. And tell me in the comments what you would have done if an HOA tried to shut down a business that had legally existed longer than the HOA itself. If you enjoy property rights stories where people win with records, surveys, permits, and lawful process instead of reckless revenge, subscribe for the next one. Vanessa wanted my trucks gone. The county confirmed the trucks were allowed. She wanted the feed mill treated like an incompatible outsider. The zoning record showed it had been there first. She wanted the HOA entrance protected from commercial traffic. The survey showed part of that entrance was sitting inside the commercial access easement. In the end, I did not shut down. They moved the wall. I did not change the business into something Lake Ridge preferred. They changed their enforcement policy. I did not need to punish 73 homeowners for one board's mistake. I needed one thing: a clear line between what Lake Ridge controlled and what it did not. The zoning map drew that line. The deed confirmed it. The easement protected access, and the county made everyone respect it. A newer neighborhood does not erase an older property right. A prettier entrance does not cancel a recorded easement. And an HOA preference is not the same thing as zoning law.